Okay, so this is what we're going to handle today. We're going to handle the three biggest burning issues of Judaism in general. And really the ultimate issue is, why is this relevant to me in my life? Why does this really make a difference? And number one is there a God? Number two, is the Torah really God's will? You know, there's other people who think God wrote books. You know, why is ours the definitive word of God as opposed to theirs, right? And number three is, even if you say these are, that there really is a God, and you say that Sinai really happened, who says the transmission of Torah is an accurate transmission, right? You get those three questions? I think we'll do this in three parts. We'll see how far we get with each part. And we'll take it from there, okay? I'd like to go, first of all, with the God question. I'd like to go with the simplest answer of all the answers. It was brought by the Rambam, but we'll make it especially clear, okay? The simplest of all the answers is that we're handling three questions here. Is there a God? Did God give the Torah at Mount Sinai? And three is, how do we know the transmission of what is a Jew and how does a Jew live his life accurate today? So we're going to go with the simplest understanding of God, and that is that the world didn't create itself. It doesn't stand to any reason or any logic for us to think the world created itself. We know the world was created. We know there was a time, so to speak, where there was no world. Whether you're a big banger and you believe that God created the world from, a speck of matter, and that was a condensed, intensely condensed, piece of matter that exploded into the Big Bang. So before that little speck of matter, there was nothing. Or you're into Genesis. If you're into the book of Torah, of Genesis, before there was something, there was nothing. Either way, you're starting with nothing. And when you start with nothing, and then you have something, it already defies all possible logic. Because everything in the physical world is cause and effect. This table is the cause of is the effect of a previous cause, which wherever they made this table and whatever they made it out of also had a previous cause that created the metal for the table and the wood for the table. And everything's always cause and effect. Everything comes back. Every chicken came from an egg, right? Every tree came from a seed that was in a fruit of a previous tree, previous fruit. So everything in the world's cause and effect. So why would I think that the world itself was not caused by some kind of creator? It had to have been made by a being. Because if there was absolute nothingness, there's absolutely nothing to create it, which means it would never have been created. Even that speck, that condensed piece of mass that they want to say the Big Bang started with, even that wouldn't exist unless God created it to begin with, because otherwise there would be absolutely nothing. Yeah?
Then you asked the question about how is God created? God.
You wouldn't have that question, because it's nothing. How can you have nothing? Nothing doesn't exist anyway.
Well, then you can answer that, how the world was created. The same way God was created. God was just there.
Yeah.
So you just say this particle was just there. You could equate this particle with God.
Oh, like that?
Yeah.
You could say that just as, well, it happens to be we know it wasn't, meaning that there wasn't just a particle sitting around. We just know there wasn't. In science, we know there wasn't. It wasn't just a particle sitting around.
Whatever it was, however...
There was nothing.
So then why can't we just say that there wasn't God?
There wasn't.
So God doesn't exist.
God doesn't exist in the way you think things exist.
Did God create the world?
For sure.
Well, by the same logic that God created the world, somebody had to have created God.
God doesn't exist. How can something that have, not that God doesn't exist, but how can something have made something that always exists? The world definitely doesn't always exist. The world was created, and the world was created and began and went. Like if you're into Genesis, it says in the beginning. So there's a beginning. If you're into science, so before the Big Bang, it began.
But at some point it began.
The world.
Right.
But God doesn't exist in physicality. God takes up no space and time.
So we're not answering the question. We're just saying.
What's the question?
How is God there in the first place?
He's not. He doesn't have any existence. He's pure.
That doesn't really resonate. No?
That's what I'm saying. Any concept you've ever had of God always exists, has to have him be this being that exists.
Is there of God? What is it?
We don't have any.
So we're just saying the world was. So we could just say that God. So we're saying essentially God doesn't exist.
Not in any way you think existence exists.
So why does there have to be a concept of God?
Doesn't. But it would be highly illogical that the world made itself from nothing. And so we call that.
It's much more logical to think that there is a God, but his existence defies all logic and we don't really understand, so he doesn't really exist.
Doesn't exist the way we would understand existing.
But if we can't even begin to grasp it, we could grasp much more about how the world was created from nothing. I could come up with better logic than saying the way the world was created and God was there or whatever we're seeming to label God as. It's much more logical to say that the world came out of nothing than to say that there is a God, but we have no idea what he's talking about or what he is or that he was there.
We say the world came out of nothing, yeah? And that nothing is what we call God. And we have no idea what it is. Just like you can't conceive of nothing. And you might say there's nothing in my hands. They're full of air. The human mind can't conceive of nothing.
Scientifically analyze what's in your hands.
As something.
Right.
But you cannot scientifically analyze nothing.
Because it's not there. So
Not there. There is no there in nothing.
So we could easily just say that there isn't a God.
Exactly.
As easily as to say that there is a God.
Except for what? What's the big issue that makes us start wearing tzitzis and kippas and keeping kosher and all that?
Not sure.
We already said it several times now. Steve, you remember? Yeah, good. Common sense, logic. That what? That's exactly what we said. Good. That what? I forgot your name.
Michael?
I knew your name. I didn't want to guess. I knew it.
Is it fair to say that God created the universe, but then the world was created from the Big Bang theory that occurred in the universe, and the Earth was created by itself?
That's bringing up another issue, but the point is for us is that the fact that there's a world here is why we call it God. If there was not a world, if God never made a world, we would never call it God.
You said a second ago that God could easily exist as he doesn't exist.
Right?
Which means that just because there is a world doesn't necessarily mean that God created it. You could just say
Where'd it come from then?
out of nothing. Because according to what you
Out of
said
nothing,
earlier,
but that nothing probably had a lot to do with making the world. There was no Home Depot.
so you're saying God.
Where'd God got the world from Home Depot? There was nothing.
You're saying so God created, but secondly, you said God doesn't exist really.
Not in any
God-
physical
God
form.
caused the world the universe to exist.
The physical universe. Yeah.
The physical universe exists. But if God doesn't exist as he exists, right, then how was it created?
God does exist how God exists, but we have no idea what that is. So if there was no world, so it wouldn't exist anyway, because it's not made of anything. There's no existence to it. However, now that we have a world, that means that there's some being that has a lot of intention that made the world.
Out of nothing.
Nothing doesn't make anything. Sorry. Nothing makes nothing. Nothing always makes nothing. Never changes.
But if God, is everybody else having a problem with this, or?
No, you're doing great. You're believe me, this is normally when someone talks to the teacher, everyone else shuts down. You're doing exactly what needs to happen right now. You're keeping everyone in.
But if nobody else has a problem, then
They do. They do. I do too. I just have been through this many times.
Okay. So one more time. Okay. So God, there is a world. So the world must have had a designer. Correct?
Okay, if you want to say it that way, that works.
Designer.
We can call it a creator. And once you start getting into the design, then it goes even further. Wow, what design? But let's just say a creator.
So there must have been, okay, so there has to have been created.
Right. Because nothing makes nothing.
But we can't seem to understand the creator because there couldn't have, because the creator was always there. Was always
Exactly. We'll never
so
understand.
we can't understand.
We have no idea.
We have no idea how it happened.
We have no idea how it happened, well, Kabbalistically they speak a bit about it, but not a ton.
The light, okay.
But we know nothing about it. We know a lot more about the world than we know about God. We don't know much about God.
Right.
We know nothing about God.
So why can't we say the same thing about the world? We just don't know
The world?
about how the world was created. Yeah, why can't we say the world was created?
Well, you have scientists with their theories, and you have Kabbalists with their tradition, and
So why can't we just say as easily the world came out of nothing?
we do.
So then we don't need God. And God didn't have to create it. Didn't have to have created the world
And where'd the world come from?
itself.
Itself? What's itself?
Or maybe not, but we don't have to run.
What's
God.
itself? You said itself.
I don't know. However we understand light and photons and
None of that exists. None of that existed either.
okay, well then you come into the same question of God. God didn't exist then.
Right.
So if God didn't exist.
He didn't exist in space, time, light, nothing. None of that stuff is God. He didn't exist in any of that. That's not what God is. God is not light.
But why are we running to God if we don't understand God? When we say we don't understand how the universe was created.
The word God is exactly the best word you could use. What does God mean? Define the word God. Define the word God.
I'm not sure how you're defining it.
I'm asking you to define it.
How I understand God.
I think that's important.
Okay, but I don't say that's really relevant right now.
You define the word God.
God
You use the word God, so you might as well know what you're talking about.
omnipotent. He is omnipresent. I don't know. I think
Okay, but those are all like more about God's ability.
what else is there to define God?
Answer? Nothing. He has no definition.
So did he intend to have created the world?
Well, now you're going into design. Once you start looking at the design, the answer is,
I'm being forced to. How else are we going to?
because you look at the design, you're like, whoa, this is no mistake.
You could say that you're right, there is no mistake, but if the world was created infinity years ago, then whatever the chances are, 1 out of quadruple billion, thousand, whatever, trillion, 1 over that is still greater than 1 over infinity. So the world was going to have been created.
Not really.
If you sit monkeys, right? The question is like if you sat a monkey, right? Sat a monkey down and he just typed away. Well, what are the chances that he would come up with a Shakespeare, right? Word for word or letter for letter. Right?
It would probably get less likely the longer he types, even though it seems like it should get more likely. It's just never going to happen. The answer is never. It will never happen.
No, if we're looking at probability, right? If they were typing for an infinite amount of time, then over an infinite amount of time, then 1 over that, whatever it is, an entire play would have been created from Shakespeare. If it was an infinite amount of time, 1 over that, no matter what it is, probability-wise, scientifically-wise, the world would have been created. So we're saying if the world did create, if there was infinite amount of time before and after.
See, that works against that argument because the amount of that is it's such a vast. Meaning, I forget what the mathematician said, but it was something like you'd have to have a quadrillion Big Bangs to create one Earth, and that would only happen if there was a God.
Okay.
Meaning, it just would never happen. And there was one big and.
If the universe is infinite, if the universe is infinite, so then there's an infinite amount of time to make Earth.
The fact is the universe is not infinite. The universe is very finite, and there's been one Big Bang, and there was an Earth that popped out from that.
Right, no, but if we're going by the design argument of how the world could have been so amazing and beautiful, there must have been a God, you could say that no, over an infinite amount of time, a world like this would have been created. You're right, it would have been trillions of years, more than that.
Right, but then you'd have to ask.
Or whatever power it is. But over an infinite amount of time, it would have been created.
But then you'd have the whole issue of humans. Humans create another issue. Humans are a major problem in that discussion. Because humans spend, they spend all their time thinking about anti-evolutionary, humans are like kind of anti-evolutionary for various reasons, but one of the most important is that, that human beings' incredible desire for understanding why or how God created us leads to non-evolutionary things. It leads to God awareness, leads to working less, because now you start like resting one day a week. It leads to giving, which makes you less apt to survive. It leads to, I mean, the whole human introspection and extrospection, the desire to know reality will lead. First of all, it just doesn't make any sense how we would have been developed such a way, because it leads to non-evolutionary findings. We defy all norms of evolution and survival. No, there's the problem. Whenever you're talking probability, there's always a probability of every possibility, but you have to suspend all common sense at that point. See, you keep loving to go back to this probability business, but every time you do that, you're suspending common sense.
I'm using common sense.
No, you're not. You're suspending common sense.
You're talking about
What you're doing is you're trying to say anything's possible so we can get God out of our picture.
No, you brought
When the most simple, you heard of Occam's razor in philosophy?
Occam's,
Razor.
maybe.
It's in philosophy department. Occam's razor is that the simplest answer is usually the right one. You're going exactly opposite of Occam's razor.
I'm trying to look for the right
It's not
answer. I'm
true.
not looking for.
It's not true. If
The more
you
you're thinking
involve
about
a
it, the more
metaphysical
confused you're getting.
being,
It's very
so then
simple.
that's not simple.
No, it's very simple because nothing makes nothing. So the simplest thing is to say that this world was created.
But if there is
Why would
a
this-
natural way to explain the universe, so then that would be it, no matter how.
There is none.
So we run over to God. Or
No, even if you go Big Bang, you'll notice every professor who starts a Big Bang class, and I've been in the classes, I've been in both in high school and college, they always start with that spec.
You're right.
They never, you can't even discuss it. You raise your hand, you get thrown out of class. You want to talk about where the spec came from, you're in trouble. They always start with the spec. Well, that's very convenient to start with the spec. Let's talk about what was before the spec. What?
It's also very convenient to start with God as creating.
It's common sense, not
It's not
convenient.
common sense. It's as easy to go to say that this part of the part was created from itself and saying that there's God.
Not created from something, don't use that language. You'd have to say it was always there.
The part was always there or whatever. You can't really define it as a part because it's not really, whatever. I don't know all the physics.
The spec of mass was always there. That's what you'd have to say.
Even, I think it was before that. It was created, or I don't think it matters. It was created out of light. I'm not really sure. But it's as convenient to say that there's a God as to say that this part was always there. It's much more convenient to say that there's a God. We don't understand, so there's a God.
It
Why
makes
not?
the most common sense that the world was created
It's not
because it comes from nothing. There's no such thing as light or specks in nothing.
That's not. I don't know all the physics behind it. But
I
don't
could
know
tell
if
you,
it's
I taught this
true.
class to the MIT Technion University of Physics. Okay, I taught it to the physics class. Not one person in there argued about the fact that the world's made of nothing. But you somehow
I'm not saying I
are
was-
arguing about
no,
it.
I'm saying that I don't know. But I'm saying
That's what they say. They say, the physicists say, that there was definitely not a speck at one point. The speck was put there. What put the speck there is a question mark. We don't know.
This part was always there, or whatever it is. But
They don't say that. They say they don't know what put
right,
the speck.
okay, so whatever it is, however it got there, I don't know. But if you want to answer it with God, okay, good. But that you could say it's common sense, or I could say that it's not common sense. Why are we running to God? It's crazy.
Because nothing makes nothing.
So we have to say that there's a God.
Well, nothing certainly wouldn't make a world.
Well, we have to find out then. How would
You can't.
We can.
You cannot because the only way you could possibly figure out that you'd need some kind of scientific measure. You need some kind of scientific measure.
Okay, and
Well, how do you measure scientifically nothing?
They're trying to create it in a particle collider, whatever they're trying to do now.
That's a bit of another subject, but what you'd have to do is have some kind of instrument of measure that goes outside space and time.
Okay.
You're never going to have an instrument of measure that goes outside space.
But
They know. There's no such thing. All physics, all these things they do with particles and proton, neutron, electron, quarks and gluons and their particle splitters and they have over in England and looking for the God particle. All that stuff is theoretical physics because science ends where space and time begins. Second you have space and time, you are no longer in science, you're in theory. Now, there's plenty of science that's theoretical.
Right, so we should look at that instead of running. Why are we running so fast to that?
Because
Theory now.
no, because theory is basically it always leaves it a question mark.
God is
But
also.
God is also.
What?
God is also.
It's not a question mark at all.
Of course it is. It's like giving up. It's like, oh, we're not going to look at theory, so we won't look at God.
Giving up?
We can't understand God, right?
No.
It doesn't matter.
No, you don't understand. You're misunderstanding. Listen, a question mark, when you go in the physics of it, if you just leave it as a question mark, yeah, which is what most scientists I meet like to leave it as. Okay, I mean, Hawkins has a bit of a chutzpah to like start talking about atheism and stuff. Even the biggest atheist, most outspoken atheist in the world, in England, what's that guy's name? Dawkins. Yeah. Even Richard Dawkins no longer claims to be an atheist. You know about that? He's now calls himself an agnostic, and he's like, what? That's what he says basically. But now he went to agnosticism. Anyway, the bottom line is that most scientists you'll meet will call it a question mark, and they leave it a question mark. Meaning, I had a major physicist in my class. It was amazing, and he was in specifically the study of looking for the one unit of matter that's the unit of all creation. Yeah, I forget what it's called. Anyway, but that's the job of theoretical physics. Anyway, he himself said that that it's always was a question mark and will remain a question mark in the world of science, what made the world. Yeah? But that's because they're scientists, that's their job. Their job is to measure matter. Their job is to share their findings when they are looking for, they're trying to look for some kind of observable phenomena. That's the job of a scientist. Now here there's never going to be an observable phenomenon because it's outside time and space. You can't observe something outside time and space. So you're relegated to theory, okay? Whereas when you discuss with such physics, including the physicist who was in this class, when you discuss with him that nothing existed before there was something, yeah, you listening? Nothing existed before there was something. So in Judaism, we call that nothing God.
I feel we're just giving up.
You explain to me why I'm saying that. Maybe you're just missing this.
Like you're saying,
What's your name? Yoni?
yeah.
Yoni, you tell me, why am I saying it's God? It's hardly giving up.
Because we can't explain how something came out from nothing. One sentence.
No, you're wrong. That's not what I was saying. I think, though, that's where you're off in what we're saying. You got to listen with a more diffuse thinking. Less. No, it's fine.
Yeah.
Listen. No, it's clear. I think everyone's making this mistake a little bit. But listen carefully. It's very subtle, but really important to get. Is that nothing, yeah, and then something means that the nothing had to have had a lot to do with the something, whatever that nothing is, yeah?
Nothing is nothing, so it can't have anything to do with anything.
Well, then you'd never have a creation. Here we go again. You'd never have a creation if the nothing's truly nothing.
So now we're saying that
If the nothing's
nothing,
absolute nothing.
I'm not really sure where we're heading now.
Did you ever watch Seinfeld? It's a show about nothing.
I don't know. So you just said that nothing is really doing nothing.
It doesn't take up any space or time or anything. It's not light, it's not light energy, it's not anything.
But you're saying it's something. Because you're saying it has a connection with something. So
It's something that's completely and totally inconceivable. But it set the world in motion, if you want to be like.
So then you could say the same thing in regards to nothing and creating light or whatever this particle is.
We just did.
So why
That's
do
what
we
I said.
want God? We don't need God.
Call it a schlaka. That's why we love the word God, because God doesn't mean anything. What does God mean? Doesn't mean anything. G-O-D. The word G-D means absolutely nothing. It's, in fact, it's my favorite name of God, by the way, over all the other names we use. Elohim, Shakai, Adne, Aleph, Daled, Nun, Yud. My favorite's actually this one. You know why? Because it means nothing. And that's who God really is. Doesn't mean anything. So it's the coolest name of God, because it really has no meaning. Every person you will ask will have a totally different definition, and everyone's wrong, because it has no definition.
But you're saying that God created something. Or not.
Nothing created something.
So then,
Nothing created something. What?
Nothing is God.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
We're on the same page. We've been on the same page. I think we just had to get there somehow.
So my idea of God as omnipotent or
That's already going to what God's capable of.
It's not. Well, God can't be capable of anything if it's just coming out of nothing.
God's not coming out of nothing. The world's coming out of nothing. God is nothing.
But the world.
God is nothing. Okay?
You're saying that God is nothing.
Perfect.
Anything you can think of, God is not that.
Whatever your concept of God is exactly wrong. Any concept you've ever had of God is exactly wrong.
It's not more than
Because it's nothing.
You can't imagine
Okay,
God is
so
so
then
time.
what?
It's
Okay, keep
incomprehensible,
going.
man.
You want me to keep going?
Keep going. And then we're going to come back to this and you'll see.
Okay, so this is really step 2. So step 1 is before there was something, yeah, there was nothing. Okay?
That was related to something.
No, there was just nothing. There was absolute nothingness. There was no relating to anything. There was nothing.
You said that nothing had to have been related to something.
No, I didn't. I said something had to have come from the nothing. But right now there is no something. This is
You said if something exists, so then the nothing that was before it had to do with creating.
had to do with it.
I'm pretty sure you used the word related.
Not. But listen, before, just stick with this, Yoni.
Okay.
Just go step by step. Before there was something, what was there?
A nothing that was related to something. A nothing. I don't
Nothing.
really know anymore.
Nothing. Before there was something, there was nothing. Before the speck, before anything.
Yeah.
Before the light that made the speck, if you want to say. Before light energy.
Okay.
There was absolutely nothing. We can't conceive of that nothing. And that nothing, now, it's impossible for there to be a world from that nothing. Unless, of course, that nothing has the ability to make the world. Unless that nothing made it. Steve, can you help us?
Why is there a before as opposed to an eternal universe?
Oh, why don't we do eternal universe? So, they, first of all, a lot of Eastern traditions go with eternal universe. Hindu goes with the eternal universe. The reason we do it is, number one, as Jews, which is our second subject of Sinai. We believe this book's divine, and it does say that there was a beginning.
Does it say the beginning?
This is Bereshit, but you'll see it. It translates in the beginning.
But is it the beginning?
Before there was Sinai, yeah?
And couldn't it be the beginning?
What?
A beginning? Not necessarily the beginning.
And the word itself doesn't even mean beginning, but the word Bereshit. But the point is that our tradition is that God created the world from absolute nothingness, and then the world was created. If you read the story, I mean, it's like, have you read the Genesis?
My problem is that
You ever read the
I
book?
only speak English.
No, it's a very good point that you need the Hebrew. No, but I'm just saying, if you look at the story, it's clearly talking about there was, in the beginning of God's creating, the heaven and the earth, which would automatically tell me that there was a point where there was no heaven and earth, but rather God created them.
Or is that just our current assumption based on scientific knowledge?
I'm sorry?
Is that based on...
This is based on this is just what we got at Sinai. Now, we also have, the other reason we say it is beginning, meaning right now all we're doing, I hope, Yoni, I haven't spaced you out on Steve's question, but what we're doing right now is just dispelling this eternal universe concept, which is more of an Eastern concept. Scientific findings. Oh, you know what? There was a period of time around Einstein's time where they wanted to say, they were very uncomfortable with this expanding universe thing, because if you say there's an expanding universe, it means it's expanding from a point, right?
It's illogical.
When you see something expanding, it means it's expanding from a point where it started expanding. What's the problem with that? Is they knew, and everyone knows, that once you start from a point where it expands from, you have God, because something had to make it start. First, someone had to make it and make it start. So what they had a theory of an expanding and contracting universe, which would fit better with the Easterners.
Now, a God is outside of time, right?
Yeah.
So why would God create a finite universe?
That's an amazing question.
I think the Big Bang is fundamentally flawed and shouldn't be considered.
Okay. So you have that question, why would God bother? That's an amazing question. We don't have an answer for that. Judaism doesn't answer that.
No, why would he create a finite universe as opposed to an eternal, infinite universe? If he's outside of time, there's no
I see your question. Why would he create it finite
yeah.
as opposed to infinite? I mean, you have to understand, in Judaism, we don't even believe he created it. We don't exist. This is all, none of the creations ever left God's mind.
I agree.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
So
We are part of an infinite universe. But as far as what your mind, the little part of you that feels like it's in this room right now, and the time started at 10:10 we started, and then we ended at 11, and all that clicking away of time is all a figment of God's imagination.
So why does the Bible say?
Because this figment of God's imagination started then.
Which was a finite time?
Yeah, it started at a certain point. But it doesn't actually exist in any empirical or absolute existence. It is completely subordinate and within the mind of God, all physical existence.
You're saying this is like concrete. I mean, is it actually concrete, or is this just what you believe?
Well, watch what happens. Let's just go through this again. Before there was something, there was nothing. Okay?
I want to stay away from that right now.
Can there be anything before something?
What?
Can there be anything before there was something?
Before there was nothing?
No, before there was something.
Before there was something.
You can't have anything.
Okay.
That's the number one. Number two is that God is, so just like there was nothing before something, we call that nothing. I should really flip it around. Because that's going to come down here. That nothing is what we call God. Okay? That's what we call God, which we've already discussed back and forth a million times. You say, why do you have to fall into God? And I say, because it's common sense, because absolute nothingness would never make something. Number 3 and 4 are together. They're the two things we know about nothing of God, the nothingness of God. Number 1 is that it is one, okay? Meaning you can't have two nothings. Is that clear? Once you have nothing, it's absolute oneness. It is a unified, undifferentiated reality, or lack of reality, because there's nothing there. But it doesn't, if you multiply nothing by 30, what do you get, Ephraim? Raphael or Ephraim? Ephraim. What do you get? Nothing. It's nothing and it has no parts.
Zero or infinite?
What? We're not discussing mathematics right now.
Oneness, not one.
It's oneness. It's undifferentiated oneness. I just put one because in the Shema it says echad. But it's really what Ari's saying.
You can't define it if it's nothing or infinite.
It just doesn't have any parts, Yoni.
Add two nothings for me, please. What does it make?
Wait, zeros or infinite?
No math. We're not in math classes.
He's saying as a physicality, just listen to what he has to say and stop fighting it.
I've been doing this a lot of years.
I used to fight just like him all the time.
I understand. It's cool, but that's why you're picking it up, because you're picking it up on your radar. Some of you, anyone else picking up on their radar? Yoni's fighting? You were too? But the rest of the guys were with Yoni. I was with Yoni. I was totally with Yoni. So, but the thing is, you guys are picking it up on your radar for whatever reasons you guys picked that up on your radar. Yoni's been doing very good, and I don't want to comment more, but we're doing fine. We're doing fine. Chill out. Everyone take a deep breath. And but I have to explain something to Yoni and to the other 4 guys who are all cool with this discussion. You've been cool with it?
I mean, I've been through a lot. For me, I know God. I don't really. In some ways, I'm going to go into like He will, but in some ways, I'm just going to take it for it because my life has sort of proved certain things that I cannot go against that. That's what it comes down to.
You got the experience factor.
Yes.
Okay, so fine. Listen.
Hold on.
Yeah.
What's your name?
Ari.
Did you also have the experience factor?
Yes.
You too?
Yeah.
What happened when the experience?
That's why you're here probably.
What
Because
happens
you
when
had the experience
fails?
too.
Yeah, what happens when the experience fails? Then what? You have nothing to go on with the experience. You have basic law.
What I mean by experience factor is they experience things where God would have to be.
Right.
Also, you can't comprehend.
It's the same thing also with me. That
You also had some anomalies
Yeah,
that.
Right, so I had all these questions, right? And then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I don't have any more questions because God exists, right? 'Cause it's so obvious.
Right.
Whatever happened in my life happened.
Yeah.
Right?
So you had the
I
experience
I
factor.
had that also, and then like now I'm here, and I'm like, wait a second, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Okay, just because I can't.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So many times, by the way, in my life, I had the experience factor where I was like, okay, there's a God. I can never, ever deny that again.
Right.
And then, like, a month later, it was gone. You know, a month later, it was all out the window. And we learned that the Torah was given at Sinai, and 40 days later, we're sinning at the golden calf. So the experience factor, what we're learning from this, is that the experience factor must be backed up by some logic to hang in there when the experience is gone, and I don't know, you know, it's a memory of the experience, and I need to be able to back that up. But there's something else I want to share with everybody, and that is something called diffuse thinking. There's 2 types of thinking. What you've been doing right now has been, I don't know what the opposite of diffuse, focused, acute, what?
Critical?
Yeah, they're both critical thinking, but diffuse thinking would be an aspect of critical thinking where you're going to get to the truth of it better. It'd be like you ever seen those pictures where if you stare at them long enough, you get to see something totally different that's 3D inside of it? You ever seen those? They were like popular like 25 years ago.
Oh, man.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah, so when you look at the picture, you just pass the picture and you're like, oh, that's, you know, kind of ugly. Look a little ugly, a lot of specks and everything. But then someone says, why don't you stare into it for a few minutes? And you stare into it, 1 minute goes by, 2 minutes goes, 3 minutes, you're like, oh, this is getting a little boring. They're like, just keep looking, keep looking. And then eventually, boom, you're in, yeah? So what happened? What shifted? Because the image you see inside that picture really is there. What happened was when you were looking at it at the beginning, you were looking at with, I'm going to call it acute because I don't know the right word, but you were looking at with acute thinking, of critical thinking, you were looking at it in an acute way. And so all you saw was specks. And it was getting quite boring standing there staring at those specks. But what happened as you stared at it is eventually your mind allowed you into what's called diffuse thinking. And in that diffuse thinking, you got to see what's there. And it really is there because the artist put it there. It was embedded in it. It was embedded inside there. It exists. But it only could come to the mind when you went to the diffuse thinking. So I'm using that as an introduction. I do a course in Kabbalah. My emphasis over the years has been in Kabbalah, but I usually say what I just said to you guys. I haven't said it in years because I haven't done the course in years, but I used to do a course in Kabbalah. It's a whole semester at Hebrew University that started with teaching about diffuse thinking. So you've been approaching this whole discussion with acute thinking, which I'm happy to do. It is essential. I come where you guys are. I'm not here to keep everything on my level. I'm with you. So I want to be, if you want to go acute thinking, we'll go acute thinking. But there is a point where where your acute thinking can get a little too strong. You start losing the fact that nothing has no parts. Once you can't agree with nothing having no parts, you know acute thinking is never going to get you anywhere in this discussion. Whereas diffuse thinking is like, of course nothing has no parts. You understand? In diffuse thinking, I know that 30 times nothing is nothing. It has no parts. It is an absolute undifferentiated whatever, nothing. It's an undifferentiated nothing. Now, what's cool about that, separate subject, what's cool about that is if you go through this entire book, never does it say there's one God. You know that? You know, it never says there's one God in this book. If anything, it insinuates there's more than one God, because you have the second commandment of the 10 commandments is don't believe in all these other powers out there. Don't ascribe power to any deity or any other thing. Who said anything about other powers? Whoa. Like the Torah itself admits there's other powers. It admits there's some kind of metaphysical realm of power out there. And it's saying, but pledge your allegiance to the power of powers. The Melech Malchem Lachem, the King of Kings, right? The power of all power. But it never says that there's one God. What does it say, though? In Shema Yisrael, that's from the Torah. What's it say? Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Absolute oneness. The Torah, it doesn't say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, there's one of him. It says, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It's absolute, undifferentiated oneness. Whatever the nothing is one. That's one of the commandments, by the way. 10 commandments that there is a God. One of the other commandments is that God is absolutely one. So if you get that God's one, if you just get that in your mind, that nothing means undifferentiated oneness, you fulfill the commandment. It's like putting on a pair of tefillin. It's like eating matzah on Passover. It's like sitting in a sukkah. Seriously, all you have to do is think about this concept right now. Just think that thought that of undifferentiated oneness. Think that thought for a second. You got yourself a mitzvah. It's listed by the Rambam as one of the 613 commandments is to just think about the fact that God exists in undifferentiated oneness. You got a mitzvah right there. It's like you gave tzedakah, or it's like you put on a mezuzah, it's like you put on tefillin. All you have to do is think about that for a moment. Or to just think about that before there was something, there was nothing that we call God. It's another mitzvah that's in the 10 commandments, that you should believe there's a God, is in the 10 commandments. And what does Rambam say? Because this whole discussion has been Rambam. This is Rambam's first cause proof. Okay, you guys realize we've been discussing Rambam this whole time? This is Rambam's first cause proof. And does he say that the first commandment is to believe there's a God of the 10 commandments? Nope. He says you have to know. The first commandment of the Rambam is you must know there's God, not believe. He makes it very clear. Belief in God, you did not fulfill the commandment. You have to know. Belief is something that lacks evidence and lacks critical thinking, as you were saying, but it's something I would like to believe, or something like you must believe that Mashiach's coming, for example. Do I know? I believe it. Yeah. And what?
Can you know the Mashiach's coming?
Can you know? I don't want to discuss it now because it's after 4, but normally I'd be open to it. But that knowing there's a God, according to the Rambam. By the way, the Ramban argues and says belief is fine. You fulfill the commandment with believing in God. But the Rambam says no. If you haven't gotten to the logical steps, and the Ramchal, speaking of all the Rams, Ramban, Ramchal, you know what he says in his first line of the way of God, Derech Hashem? He went convenient way. He said, every Jew must believe and know that there is a first cause. He says both. And then he goes on, first paragraph's about belief. He says you get it from your parents. When you're raised, they teach you about God. You don't know anything, but they tell you about God. Belief. And then the third paragraph of the book is he defines the word know. And he says that you have to use your critical thinking. You have to go think about it, which is what we're doing now. Before there was something, there was nothing. That nothing is what we call God. There is that God is undifferentiated oneness, and there's one other thing we know about God, and that is that, and again, I wrote the word intelligence. I could write a bunch of other words. I could write consciousness. I could write intentioned. But because of the nature of nothing is to remain nothing, You get that? The nature of nothing is to stay in that state of nothing. The fact that it, for some reason, set in motion our world, our creation, means that it knows what it's doing. It has some kind of intention. Whatever that nothing is, it intended for creation. Otherwise it would never be, because nothing just stays nothing. As something that stays absolutely static, which nothing could only be static, stays static, unless there's some kind of thing that puts in motion. In this case, there's no it, it's nothing. But a ball that sits on the table, it stays on that table unless there's a force. It has to have some applied force to make that ball move. Whether it's gravity or it's wind or it's something else. It has to be applied to something. Here we're talking about nothingness. Nothingness definitely stays nothingness. But if that nothingness suddenly set something in motion, which obviously it did, or we wouldn't be having this discussion right now here on Earth, it set something in motion. So it must know what it's doing. Now again, I could have written anything here. I wrote intelligence just because that's the way they call it, intelligent design. And in the science world, of course, you could lose your status as a professor at university for saying that intelligent design is considered very unpopular in the atheist circles. But that's the whole fight. If you go online, you'll see all the fights on the blogs are intelligent versus random design, or I don't know what the other term is they use.
Ontological, right?
Whatever. So anyway, but whatever the nothing is, it knows what it's doing, and it has to know what it's doing even before you get to design. Without design, just the fact is, nothing will stay statically nothing. And the fact that it kicked the world into existence means that it knows what it's doing and it's got intention. Okay, then we got to start going into what's its intention and all that stuff. We can discuss that later. There's going to be 5 and 6, but we're not going to do those right now. Steve, you have a question?
Why is God nothing instead of everything? He's also oneness.
Yeah, he is. That you said well. That's exactly. He's nothing and everything.
But why is he nothing instead of everything?
He is. I mean, he's everything.
Well, once you get
Then how is he nothing?
Yes.
If he's everything.
Well, because the everything didn't exist at one point, so therefore he's really, because the first state, if there's such a thing as first, but there really is in this case because it's in the beginning. We're back to the beginning. Because the first state of God is nothingness, it's nothing.
Again, though, I mean, I'm not sold on that thing.
Well, we haven't gotten there. That's number 2.
The beginning, though,
That's-
is very, very different from a beginning or some other.
Well, the story itself, the storyline goes into the actual creation of
Of Earth.
it starts with light, and then it goes to mineral, and then it moves
But is that creation of the entire infinite cosmos, or the creation of our cosmos, our local cosmos?
it's the beginning of the metaphysical and physical space-time continuum. The entire space-time continuum is what it means by in the beginning. And you don't have to take my word for it, just read the next lines. The next lines are going into this whole primordial soup that God created, that ultimately then he distinguished this from that, light from darkness. And so.
But again, is that local or is that universal, the creation? I'm not sold.
Local and universal are synonymous to me right now.
How are they synonymous if there's an infinite universe where it's, for example,
We don't call the universe infinite. We call God infinite.
the universe in my opinion,
Universe being, it's not a question of opinion. Everything's logic in this class,
in
this
the
hour.
universe is God in a way, is the mental creation of God.
Okay, but we still don't use the term infinite universe because it was created by an infinite being doesn't make it infinite.
And according to modern science, which is opinion and not actual.
Just because something's made by an infinite being doesn't make it infinite.
I disagree.
How could if an infinite being makes a match?
Well, yeah, an individual thing, but the entire universe.
The entire universe is an individual thing.
Why would there be a boundary to the universe
It just happens to have an edge,
according to opinion,
according to science.
which is absolutely.
Oh, you'd like to say there's no edge to the universe?
Oh yeah, I think
You don't believe in the expanding
I think
universe.
The Big Bang is fundamentally flawed in So
It may be flawed, but there's still an expanding universe. You don't believe in an expanding universe?
absolutely not.
Oh, really?
It's physics.
It's not physics, it's opinion if you get down to it.
Well, it is called the Big Bang Theory. We forget the last word.
And it's, you gotta realize that
It's not gonna be proven.
like you brought up Occam's razor, expansion of space. You don't see that. Dark energy. You don't see that. There's a lot of things that have to force fit into it. So it's all based on one assumption.
Hmm. You don't like it. I see why you don't like it.
I
You
don't
take
like
Dr.
that.
Schroeder's class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. He's not here until the 11th.
Oh.
I'll certainly be talking to him.
He explains it.
But long story short, it's opinion, it's not fact. So we shouldn't.
It's theory.
We shouldn't read theory in as fact. You know?
I'm with you. I agree with you on that. But I don't know why. Maybe it's my upbringing. Maybe I'm brainwashed or something. But I tend towards discussing Big Bang. Maybe it's my audience. Most of the time, my audience
Do you know
discusses.
much about the Big Bang? Do you know why the Big Bang? The observations.
You mean all the science behind it?
Yeah.
Not much more than the basics I learned in science classes. Yeah, I don't know like the deep,
It's
greater
just-
detail.
It's theory, I mean,
Yeah, it's theory.
so let's just say hypothetically the universe is infinite. Why would God be nothing instead of everything?
No, then he would be everything.
And not
Then you'd be saying, right. But because I look at the world from a Torah perspective and a science Big Bang perspective,
Yeah.
I kind of look at it both ways.
And I'm
But
not-
either way, you're at the beginning, and therefore the universe can't be infinite because it's created automatically makes it finite.
Well, if the universe isn't infinite, then how is God infinite?
Because God's not the universe. God made the universe.
The universe is his match.
It's God's the creator of the universe. Obviously, God's mind would encompass the universe.
But how would he create something that's finite if he's capable of creating infinite? Because he is infinite.
And that's a question. Can God create something that's infinite? It's an oxymoron because the second something's created, it means it didn't exist once, so it's automatically not infinite. Get that? Think about the word think of the word created. Created implies it didn't exist before it was created, which means it can't be infinite.
Individual parts, though, if you look at the whole picture.
A whole is a part. Wholes are parts. There's no such thing as a whole that's not a part. Except when you're talking about God.
Or the universe.
The universe is definitely a part.
Of what?
It's just one thing. But it's not oneness.
Why not?
Because it's made of many parts. Oneness has no parts.
The entire universe is one universe. That's
Yeah, but you break it down to its parts, it's got tons of parts. And that's what Buddhists study, all the parts of the metaphysical.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah,
But
no, the universe is one unit called the universe made of all of its parts. God is an absolute oneness made of no parts. We're good. No, we're understanding each other.
I won't.
I think we're good now. It's just that you don't necessarily believe that the
No,
world
I
can.
think that's good. It's just misinterpreted.
So you believe in Torah, but just believe it's misinterpreted. Okay. Listen, there's a lot of rabbis, a lot smarter than me and a lot smarter than you, for the last 3,326 years, who've been teaching Torah,
Yeah.
and they all agree that the universe is not infinite. Without any dissension, like not even one, like little rabbi's like, I say the universe is infinite. You know, not even one of those guys. Nothing, zero. 326 years. Whatever, but Steve, I don't want to be rude, but you got to understand the chutzpah of a guy named Steve at 29 years old walking in saying like, you know, well, I think they're misinterpreting it, you know.
Well,
You realize,
in the beginning,
what?
in the beginning is a very different thing I think it's actually said.
I'm out of the words right now. I'm at that the universe is not infinite, but rather a being made it, and it really does have a beginning. That's what I'm saying. And that's agreed upon unanimously all the way through all the sages. By the way, those same sages don't believe we exist. They don't believe any of it exists.
Yeah.
Those same sages, all the way back, all the rabbis, all the way back, believe it's all it's really an imaginatory thing of the creator of the universe, which is infinite. But it itself, the actual figment of the imagination, this illusion of this world, is finite. In fact, finite is an illusion.
So would you call the physical world a real thing?
No,
Is there-
definitely not. Not as a monotheist, no way.
So there's not a physical world. correct?
Nope, no physical world.
Then again, why is there any kind of beginning that's a finite point in time? It's all. If God is outside,
The physical world doesn't exist, but whatever it is, that's making this sound, yeah? Whatever that illusion that God made, this like holographic illusion, yeah? Which, by the way, is all made of vibrations. Anyway, we have lasers that could dance through the raindrops of this table and come right out the other side without even touching the table. So whatever made this illusion, which is only made of math, this entire world is only made of vibrational mathematical equations. So that we know from physics. That's not theory. We know that this world's pure vibration. And so whatever made all that vibration, those vibrations make the illusion of a table. And my sound, these are also, you think I'm speaking English? This is not English. These are sound waves. You're doing tremendous math while I speak to understand what I'm saying. All of that is an illusion. But it definitely is within the, now. That's shooting across the room. What?
it's still within a finite illusion.
It's a finite illusion within an infinite being, but not an infinite universe, because the universe is part of the illusion.
Parts of infinite can be finite, so they're still infinite.
Ultimately, they're
One out of it.
of the infinite, but they themselves are the illusion, the finite illusion.
I agree, but
Oh, we're good with this now? Are we good? So you're like, you're like good with the Kabbalists, but when the Kabbalists start discussing beginnings, that's where you drop off. But they don't. But in the end, you do meet up again, Steve, because in the end, the Kabbalists themselves say this doesn't exist. So then maybe you do meet up. Okay, guys, that's time. Shalom.